welcome to another episode of Asexualise, my Asexual Life. This is the place to be for education about asexuality, all things asexual, and share my own asexual life journey in order to help you in yours. If you haven't already subscribed, hit the great subscribe button right here, right now. Please hit the notification button so you get notified right now or post a new video. So in today's live stream, I want to discuss how to know if you don't want sex because you've had sexual abuse or you really are asexual. Now, why am I talking about this topic? Because obviously it's very annoying when a lot of sexuals believe that people can only be asexual because of sexual trauma, and that sexual trauma must be the reason you don't want sex, as wanting sex is normal and not wanting sex is abnormal. First of all, I want to start off by saying any sexual orientation can be sexually abused. It doesn't change your sexual orientation. Okay, any sexual orientation can be abused. I know a heterosexual person who had sexual abuse. They still loved sex. Right? I know someone who was interested in guys, was abused by guys, and she did actually later identify as a lesbian, which is very interesting. I know someone who was bisexual. This is going a bit off topic. Who was a lesbian and then ended up marrying a guy. So I don't know if that meant she was bisexual or something else. She didn't have any trauma as far as I know. But the point is that, actually some people do change their sexual orientation. And some people choose to identify as asexual, and then it does change later on. But having said that, many people are born asexual and do not realise it, right? Some asexuals have had sexual abuse and others have had none whatsoever. So if the theory is you can only be asexual if you've been sexually abused, then that theory is very wrong, because there are a number of asexuals who've never had any sexual abuse in their life, yet they're still asexual. And if an asexual person has had sexual abuse in their life, it doesn't mean to say that's the reason they don't want sex or don't like sex, right? They can have been inherently asexual to begin with, which is my case, right? So I'm an asexual person who has sex, not now, but had sex in the past, right? And I grew up thinking I was heterosexual for years. And how do I know that the sexual abuse is not the reason that I'm identified as asexual? So if we look at sexual abuse and sexual trauma, trauma is something that affects you usually as it happens. It affects you in the past, it affects you in the present, and it affects you in the future. It is affecting you, right? Some people get over their sexual abuse, get over their sexual trauma and put it behind them, so it's no longer affecting them all their life. Or it might only be affecting their life in certain ways, not in every way, right? I've had sex since I had sexual abuse, right? I had all my sex after my first sexual abuse. The sexual abuse I had in the past doesn't affect me nowadays. It didn't affect me in a relationship, with the exception of when I had sex, and sometimes I used to have sex with naked back then. I used to not mind being naked. I used to not mind doing sexual acts. I guess looking back on it, when I was with my last long-term ex, I was probably sex neutral with him, as in I didn't mind doing it, but there was some repulsion there, as in I would have preferred not to do it because it's not really my thing. But, I guess I was sex neutral with him, because I would do that if I was okay to do it, if I was feeling all right to do it whenever he wanted. If I wasn't, then I would say no, I'm not in the mood, or can we just do something else, like kiss or masturbate each other, that type of thing, right? So my sexual past, my sexual abuse never affected that relationship, other than it made me, when his body was gyrating, when I masturbated him, for example. His body was moving backwards and forwards in a thrusting motion. It reminded me of when I was 15 and had sexual abuse. That was the only time that I got affected by abuse in the past. It didn't stop me having sex. It didn't stop me masturbating him. It didn't stop me doing anything. Now, sexual abuse and sexual trauma that's affecting your life now, that's preventing you from having sex because of the trauma itself, then that would be because of trauma, right? And if you wanted to, if you wanted to have sex, you wanted to, right? And if you wanted to, if you wanted to have sex, you wanted to try it, but you felt this traumatic experience was just blocking you. It was kind of injuring your mind. It was hurting your emotions and feelings. And every time you tried to do sex, you were just getting flashbacks and stuff like that. And yes, that is likely to be sexual trauma. And then you would need to see a professional, like a therapist, for it, right? There's no shame in that, right? Okay, so you have to understand that sexual abuse that's holding you back from sex will be the thing that's actually stopping you from having sex rather than something else, right? And so, the reason I say this is because I saw in a group very recently, in an asexual group, that someone was asking this question. They don't know if they're really asexual or if it's because of the sexual abuse they've had. Now, this person is still having sex, albeit infrequently. If that person was afraid of sex, they wouldn't be having sex at all. If they had been through so much trauma that it was affecting their life so badly, they wouldn't have sex at all, usually, if it was that big, right? But the fact the person's asking the question and worried about if it is their past sexual abuse that's making them feel this way would be indicative that maybe it is their sexual abuse, because they still feel and think and believe it might be affecting them now. So if that feels like you, if you're still being affected by your past sexual abuse or sexual trauma, then seeking the help of a professional is a good idea, right? But what's not a good idea is if you have a therapist who ends up trying to push you to do sex which you feel, or sexual acts which you feel uncomfortable with, and it continues to feel uncomfortable for you, and they continue to push you, and you're just thinking, this really isn't for me, and your instincts are kind of going against it, right? So in order to kind of heal from trauma, sometimes we have to kind of bring ourselves back to that traumatic time. Sometimes we have to face our fears head on, so it can be uncomfortable for a while. We may have to push ourselves to do some things we may not want to do, but we should still not go against our intuition, our gut instinct, our feeling. So if you've got that little voice inside your head just thinking, just sex isn't right for me, it just doesn't feel right, no matter how much I try and push myself to do it, it just doesn't feel comfortable, I just don't like it. If you don't like the sex in and of itself, and you're just not bothered about it, you're not interested in it, you don't get the feelings, the sexual urges, the wants, the needs, the desires, then you are likely asexual, right? So you have to assess yourself, your own mind, your own emotions, your own physicality. There are some people who don't want to identify as asexual who actually are asexual, and they want to push themselves and force themselves to not be asexual because it feels like they're not normal and something's lacking in them, because that's what society teaches them. And therefore they feel that there must be something wrong with them. They got to find something wrong with them, right? But you don't have to find something wrong with yourself, right? If you genuinely don't get the need, urge, want for partnered sexual intercourse, you're not bothered about sex, you don't really need sex, it's not something you care about missing, you don't feel you're missing out at all, you're not interested in it, then you likely are asexual, right? So if I analyse my past and I look back all through my childhood, right, before I had sex, when I was having sex, after I'd not had sex, it's all the same thing. I never had that feeling like I want sex with anyone. I never thought I want sex with any of my exes. Those words never popped through my head. God, I want sex with you. It didn't happen. Right? When I was 6, I had my first heterosexual boyfriend. He wanted to do sexual stuff. I didn't. I felt invaded. I felt upset. I hated it. I felt it was totally wrong. And I've been told by a counsellor that at 6 years old, that's not normal for me to feel that way. Right? Clearly, that's because I'm not normal in terms of society, because I was never heterosexual in the first place. I was always asexual, but didn't realise it. But if I look back at my life, I can see that I was asexual. So even if you've had sexual abuse or sexual trauma, think about what your life was like before you had that sexual abuse, before you had that sexual trauma. Were you looking at people's bodies in a sexual way? Were you thinking about having sex? Were you thinking in terms of like, God, I've got these urges and, you know, I wouldn't mind having sex with a particular person? If you're having all these types of thoughts about having sex from a young age before you were traumatized, before you had the sexual trauma, then yes, it might be the fact that your trauma is stopping you from wanting to have sex because you were okay before the trauma. Right, you felt sexual attraction, you were sexually attracted, you looked at people in a sexual way, right? For me, I didn't have that, you know? I was never really interested in the male anatomy, right? I think it looks like a sack of potatoes, sorry guys. But, you know, I do, right? I just it's not very appealing. A sausage and sack of potatoes is not very appealing, right? And I was thinking about I'd rather actually eat real vegetarian sausages than much on that. Oh dear, what am I like? You know, and I'm not interested in women's bodies whatsoever. I don't like them. They repulse me, to be quite frank with you. I'm okay with my own. I've trained myself really well on that, but that's the only female body I like is my own. No other female bodies. I'm not interested. I don't think they look nice. I think they're pretty disgusting. Personally, that's my personal opinion because I'm repulsed by the female naked body. Right? So, I mean, I've always had this thing where I don't like nudity, right? From a very early age. My parents used to think I was very strange. They still think I'm strange, obviously, but that's okay. I like being strange. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I've never liked nudity. I've always had a problem with nudity, especially with women's bodies. Like Page 3, when it used to be the Sun newspaper in the UK with Page 3 women on it, I thought it was disgusting and vile, and I do think there should be more equality like that. That if they're going to plaster women's boobs and butts all over the place and private parts, I think they should do that equally with men. I think it's disgusting. They only do it predominantly, mostly with female body. I think it's disgusting. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure if guys had women gawking at naked penises stuck out at breakfast, then the guys would think twice about having naked women all over the place, maybe, because they'd be thinking, God, I don't like my partner sticking, you know, looking at that person's banana while I'm trying to eat my cornflakes. You know what I'm saying? I'm digressing off loads here. But you know what I mean? What I'm saying is you need to assess what you were like before the trauma, how you reacted during the trauma, and what it was like after the trauma. Like, I don't have any... You know, I don't have any feelings about the trauma. It was a bad incident that happened in my life. It was terrible that happened in that incident. It could have been a lot worse. I wasn't, you know, there was no violence. I wasn't like hurt physically in that way. It was just mostly emotionally and mentally, you know. So for me, I consider myself very lucky and fortunate in those ways. I consider that it was a bad incident in my life and that was it. So I don't hold on to the past, you know. It's a bad incident, it happened, shit happens, excuse my language, and that's it, right? Because I've got this attitude, because I've got this mentality, I can tell, and I know wholeheartedly that if I wanted to have sex again, I really, really would. It's just that I can't do it again, right? Since I discovered AMA section 2014, it was 2012 that I just started realising that I'm very sex repulsed. And, you know, I started with my last long-term ex in 2011. And, you know, 2013, I was seeing a Bangladesh guy and I just couldn't be naked in front of him. Every bone in my body, every bit of me didn't want to have sex with him, even though I was highly aroused kissing him. So I've got this kind of I wouldn't say necessarily conflict, but you could say conflicting feelings in my body. One is I'm really, really high aroused now, but the other is I completely cannot have sex, and just every part of my body just screams, do not have sex, because I don't want it anymore. I don't want a penis in me. I'm done with all that, right? It's not who I am. And it's because, like, now I finally realised that I was asexual in 2014, that I know I don't have to have sex anymore, that it's no longer a thing that I have to push myself to do. There's no appeal to it, you know. And when I split up with my last long-term ex for 8.5 years, then it was kind of like, I want my life on my own terms now, you know. I want to be able to pick and choose the guys who I get close to, who I kiss, whether to have a boyfriend or not have a boyfriend. I program my mind to be able to live without a guy. I didn't date anyone till at least a year later. You know, because I think it was just shy of a year. I think it was 11 months and a bit. Because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to end up with the wrong guy for me again, right? And so it's very, very important that you do a self-assessment, that you're very self-aware. I'm an extremely self-aware person. And I know, looking back throughout my whole life, that I was never heterosexual. I was hyper-romantic. I've always been romantic. I've always loved passionate kissing. I still love that. I've always loved bringing movies to life. I've always loved the kisses and the cuddles and the holding hands and the walking in the park and the moonlit strolls and just the chats, like being bestest ever friends and like loving each other so much, and just, you know, like a really teenager style relationship is what I've always liked, from a kid all the way up to now. You know, teenager style. I said style, right? Not a teenager. I don't want a teenager. But you know, it's just very, very important that you get the relationship you want, and sod society, you know. I get absolutely sick of some sexuals trying to shove it down asexual's throat that you need therapy and you've got some sort of past that you've got to sort out. I've sorted my past out. I've looked at my past. I've analysed my past. I'm able to talk openly and honestly about the sexual abuse I had now. I couldn't do that years ago. I couldn't do it. Before I started this channel, people didn't know that about me. Not even those nearest and dearest knew about me. But because it's my past now, because I like got over it as much as possible, you know, I've moved on because I see it for what it is. It could have been a lot worse. Of course, it could have not happened at all, but it did, you know. It just is what it is, because I put it always down to a bad incident in my life. I never really gave it its power, if you know what I mean. A lot of people give their abuser power and they don't do it on purpose. It's just the way it is. But for me, I'm grateful and thankful that I've always treated the two incidents particularly as just incidents. And when I was 6 years old, I mean, when I was 6 years old, I was probably more traumatized from that, you know. I felt so guilty at 6 for letting someone do something I didn't want to do to me, you know, because it was just ridiculous. And so for years I felt more guilty about that. But, you know, to do with my trauma and my past sexual trauma is more to do with me feeling guilty. But I don't anymore, because it wasn't my fault. But, you know, and I realise that now. But, you know, it was more to do with me feeling guilty about, you know, like I let them do stuff to me that I didn't want to do. It wasn't about hiding it because of what they did per se. It was more because of what I didn't do, which was say when I was 15, no, because I was just so in shock at the time and I was physically held down with one arm, as you know, if you've read my personal story in my Asexual Perspectives book. And then, you know, later on I had trauma as well, which I'm going to be, you know, which I'm writing about in my Asexual Guide to Sex book, which I haven't gone into much on this channel. So you can read it in there, you know. And then the 6-year-old thing, I only came out on this channel, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, about that, you know. But I'm like, I guess like I didn't really consider that sexual abuse, but I just think, that was quite traumatizing for a 6-year-old at the time. 6-year-old me was traumatized even into my teenager years. But again, none of this stopped me having sex. So you can have sexual trauma, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean to say it stops you having sex. You can still be asexual if you've had sexual trauma. It's only if the sexual trauma is the thing stopping you having sex. Otherwise, you would have it. And whether or not you experience sexual attraction that defines where you're asexual, so you can be asexual and still have sex. Because asexuality is a lack of sexual attraction in broad terms. Just because you have a lack of sexual attraction doesn't mean to say you don't participate in sex, right? So sexual behaviour is not the same as sexual attraction. So in order to assess whether your sexual abuse is a result of calling yourself asexual, you need to be perfectly honest and truthful and open with yourself. Ask yourself, do you experience sexual attraction? Do you look at someone and think, I want sex with them? Or do you just have different other attractions? See, you can get lots and lots of other attractions that aren't sexual attraction. You can have aesthetic attraction where you like the person's looks. You can feel romantically attracted to someone where you want to hold their hand and kiss and cuddle them and have moonlit dinners. And, you can have sensual attraction where you want to stroke the person's skin, stroke their hair, stuff like that, stroke their arm, stroke their lips, stroke their cheek, you just want to touch them. You might want to massage them, you might just want to touch their skin, kiss their chest, that type of thing. And there's a number of other attractions. I have clothes attractions, so I think guys look far better with their clothes on. And yes, today in my local supermarket there is a foreign guy who works in another supermarket nearby, and he was in that supermarket, and I saw him. I hadn't seen him for ages, and I was like, hi, like this, and he waved to me. Oh my god, my heart nearly melted, because I have got really strong aesthetic attraction for this guy and some romantic attraction. He's really the type of look I go for: clean shaven, short dark hair, slightly coloured skin, absolutely beautiful. But I was going to talk about clothes attraction because his jacket was gorgeous. Honestly, it made him more stunningly beautiful because it's like a puffer jacket, and it was black and like a bright blue, and I was so much more attracted to him just from wearing that jacket. So I love like what I call DJ jackets, like bomber jackets, like, satin jackets and jackets that puff out. God, I find those so attractive, especially on young guys. And so, that is one of my attractions. So if you are assessing yourself, if you're with a partner, for example, you're trying to assess whether you experience sexual attraction, whereas other attractions, you need to go to my 7 different types of asexual attraction video. I think it was 8 different types of asexual attraction video in the end, 8. So look for that video. It's in a playlist, and go through those different types of attraction. Now, sexual attraction is when you look at someone. So you would look at your partner if you were sexually attracted to them, and you would look at them and think, God, I really want sex with you. That is sexual attraction. So if you look at your partner, experience sexual attraction, but you feel like the past trauma is just like coming up for you, you're just remembering it, you're just having flashbacks, and it's actually that's stopping you having sex because it's just too powerful and strong, then yeah, you need to get some help. You need to go through some therapy, seek a professional, try and get some help for that, because, it might be that you still end up realizing that you are asexual after all, but you might still need the trauma therapy, right? And if it is that you are afraid of sex because of trauma and you're not asexual, that's okay, but it's important that you work through that. If you have any doubt in your mind as to whether your past sexual abuse or sexual trauma is holding you back from having sex, you need to get some help or advice, because at the end of the day, I know categorically I have no problem with my past and the sexual abuse that happened to me. I didn't even think about the 15, when I was 15, it was attempted rape. It didn't really enter my head being like that. It entered my head about being sexually abused. And because I didn't say no because I was in shock at the time, I felt it was my fault in some way, which I know really it wasn't. He was older than me and I was under the age of sex legally in the UK anyway, so he would have been doing a really illegal thing. But, you know, that wasn't my fault. But, you know, but I have no qualms with the past. And if I wanted to have sex again, I really, really would. It's just I don't want it. Right? So I know that because I'm very self-aware. I'm very happy and comfortable with my past nowadays. I understand it. I accept it. You know, and yes, if I got into a sexual relationship again, I might still have some effect from when the guy was 15 and it was gyrating. It's a certain type of motion that the guy did when I was 15 that, you know, that I might end up flashing back. But like I said, it didn't stop me having sex with my heterosexual ex. You know, if it had been that bad, it would have just stopped me having sex, right? If something like that happens during sex, you can kind of like stop it for that time, change positions, talk to your partner about it, do some other sexual acts, do something different involved in sex, you know. And so there's ways of getting around it, you know. And because it was my partner at the time, I knew that wasn't the same. And I wanted to do that at the time. You know, I wanted as in, like, I was happy to do that. I know it wasn't the same as the past, you know. Past, it was forced, right? So I'm able to be very coherent and very level-headed about the difference between the past and the present. So with sexual trauma, you can't talk about your past like this, usually, unless you're comfortable enough for it and you've worked through your stuff, right? And, you know, like I said, you usually know in the moment if that's holding you back in any way or stopping you having sex, because it will be those instances that flash back or you feel those instances still, you know. There'll be, the trauma will still be affecting you to this day. I don't consider the trauma in my past affecting me greatly. I'm not going to say it never affects me at all, diddly squat, because I think anyone who's been through some trauma never really totally forgets their trauma. They never really completely stamp it out because it's a part of who, I was going to say part of who they are, but maybe that's wrong words to use. It's a part of their life. Their life does make up who they are. It can make you a stronger person because you go through the traumatic stuff, you know? So it's not, although it's bad at the time, it's not necessarily bad overall if you've been able to come to terms with it and accept it for what it was, you know? But there's no shame in still having trauma from the past like that, you know? It can be that way for some people, you know? I used to have a lot of trauma involving noises because I was in a house that was very bad with drugs and people that were trying to beat down doors and stuff, and I never took drugs. I just ended up in a house like that. And it was just hard because I remember this guy was just trying to kick the door in and I was fearful for my life, and for years and years certain noises just used to trigger that all the time, that flashback to that incident, which wasn't sexual, of course. It was a different type of trauma. But what I'm saying is, you know, there's nothing that really holds me back other than the way that I feel I don't want sex, and I don't see that as something that holds me back. It just holds me back from having sex because I don't want it, and that is a good thing, you know. I don't want sex. If I wanted sex and I liked it, I would go for it again. You know, nothing would hold me back. Nothing would stop me, you know. If I was a sexual person, I probably want and like a lot of sex because I'm a very energetic person. But I'm not interested in that, you know. It's not my thing. It's not what I'm about. And I don't feel like I'm held back in life by not having it. You know, I just feel like within my being, my true asexual being that I now know, my essence of who I am, that person, this Sandra now, doesn't want sex. It's not appropriate for me. It's not right for me. It's not interesting for me. But boy, do I love kissing. I mean, I absolutely adore kissing. You know, I mean, if people have got sexual abuse, some people can be afraid of intimacy, not just sex, but any type of closeness, any type of touching, any type of physical closeness whatsoever, right? I'm really happy to get very close with a guy with my clothes on because, like I said in the past, I was naked with my ex. After sexual abuse, I had sex and was naked with my ex, right? None of the sexual abuse stopped that. It's just that I don't really like the naked body. I'm okay with a guy's chest being naked with me now, in private, preferably, if they're my boyfriend. But, you know, but I'm happy to kiss lips outside. Tongue kiss. Quite happy. I like public kissing. There's something very exciting about that, I think. But, you know, so I'm quite happy with who I am. I'm personally not asexual because of any trauma or abuse, as I think I've made it clear in this video. But if you are feeling like there might be something in your past, some sexual trauma or sexual abuse that might be holding you back and that might be a cause for you to believe you're asexual, I think you should explore that. I don't think you should rule out the possibility that you are actually still asexual, but I think you should also consider the possibility that it might be that that's holding you back and that you're going to explore that. But when you explore it, I think you need to explore it with sensitive, kind, caring, considerate therapists, counsellors and people. Not people who shove down your throat that you've got to have sex, got to want it, got to like it, got to need it, because otherwise I think that exacerbates your trauma. It can make you more traumatized if you're naturally not that way inclined. You know, if you have a sexual person telling you you've got to have sex, you've got to want it, you've got to need it, what's wrong with you? Something's wrong with you. You know, and they're trying to kind of mind manipulate you into thinking there's something wrong and believing there's something wrong because they can't deal with the fact that you don't want or need sex. They think there has to be something wrong with you. That's the type of therapy you don't need, right? You need a person really who's pretty neutral, that if you are asexual, that's wonderful. But if your sexual trauma is holding you back, let's deal with that. Let's work through the trauma, see if you feel any different about sex, if you still feel the same, you know, if you're not interested, not bothered about it, then, you know, might still be asexual. So I think that's the type of person, therapist you need to seek out. Someone who's kind of like on the fence with you, you know, and is literally going with the flow of what you feel like and ask you exploratory questions. You know, like some of the questions you can ask yourself is, when it comes to having sex, do I get flashbacks about my previous trauma? When it comes to having sex, do I feel like I can't because the past might reoccur? When I have thoughts about sex and having sex, do I want to act on them or do I not want to act on them? When I have thoughts about sex, what is the next natural thing that I instinctively want to do? And then why don't I do that? Am I held back by anything? These are some of the sorts of questions that you could be asking yourself in order to self-analyze if you've had past sexual abuse and trauma that's stopping you moving forward, right? You know, you need to be very self-aware. You need to sit down in room with yourself and say, hey, you know, what's going on with you? You know, look at yourself in the mirror, how beautiful and gorgeous you are, and say to yourself, you know, if I could have sex right now and you know, I had the most beautiful person in front of me, they were totally my type, and I really, really felt attracted to them, would I want to have sex with them? And then you need to ask yourself why you would or you wouldn't. Like, if I've got a really hot, younger foreign guy in front of me, I know I want to snog his face off, but I know there's no way I want sex with him because I'm not interested in sex. If I was to have sex, it would be with a younger guy, not with an older guy, because I'm not attracted to older guys aesthetically. Right? I have to force myself to even be attracted to guys in their 30s usually. Like, you know, like pushing myself. But, you know, a lot of the time it just creeps me out because I'm just attracted to younger guys in their 20s. It's the way I am, you know, it's the way I'm made up. And so I think you have to handle yourself with tender, loving care. if you've got any doubt as to whether it is sexual trauma, I think you need to explore that in healthy ways and ways in which you're not made to feel bad for not liking sex. Because if you are genuinely asexual, I don't want you feeling you've got to repress that or push back on it, because that'll cause you even more trauma. You can be traumatized if you were always asexual and people try to push you into doing things that was against what you naturally are. So you have to understand that there could be some trauma in your life that's sexual related because it wasn't true to who you were in the first place. Like, you may not have wanted to have sex because you are asexual and you didn't realize it back then, and then you pushed yourself to have sex, you forced yourself to do it, or you were mind manipulated into it. You had it, and then you had the traumatic experience of, God, that wasn't for me, what did I do? Felt horrible and disgusting, it was bad for my body, because you actually genuinely don't like sex. Obviously, if you've got other issues like body dysmorphia, where you just don't like the look of your body and you feel it looks strange, or like some guys, for example, they might have no chest hair. I love a guy with no chest hair. I don't like chest hair on a guy, but some guys with no chest hair, they don't feel like an adult man, you know? And they might be in their 30s or 40s and have this, you know, it might be something that's throughout their life. And they're ashamed of their body, which can make them afraid to have sex or uncomfortable having sex. Or their heterosexual guy I dated a few years ago, he had body dysmorphia, he told me, but he loved having sex. Like, I didn't realise how sexy he was until I started dating him, and he was like basically one of those guys that just went out with women for sex usually, and so that didn't affect him. And that's what I have to say is, I know sexuals that have had sexual abuse, but that doesn't stop them being sexual. You know, it doesn't change their sexual orientation. At the end of the day, they're still sexual. They still want sex usually, you know? So I would very much in any doubt as to whether you are asexual and you have had sexual trauma, sexual abuse, I would go and get some therapy, get some counselling, you know, explore that idea and see how you feel about it. But I would also be self-aware enough to know that you might genuinely be asexual and that is okay, and just be aware that the therapist or counsellor does not push you into being something that's not true to who you are because of their own ideology. I am absolutely shocked at how many therapists and counsellors are so stuck on the ideology that everyone likes, needs sex, and it's natural, and it's a part of human nature going back to the dark caveman ages that we're not even frigging in anymore. Has no one ever heard of evolution? You know, people do change. Their genetic makeup changes. Do you know what I mean? But going back through history, and when I was at the Asexuality UK conference in 2018 as a speaker, there was the history of asexuality, and it was going back years ago. They just didn't call it asexual. Right. Back then, you know. So asexuality is not a new thing in terms of being around. It just wasn't well known about really to the 200s, you know, like to the 200s, 2000s, the 21st century, in other words. It's more known now in the 21st century, so it's really seen as more modern type of thing, you know. But it's always been there, just that people didn't recognize it as asexuality, you know. And so, you know, please do cut yourself some slack. If you feel that right now you do identify as asexual, you don't experience sexual attraction, you've got no interest in sex, you know, there's no drive for sex there's no need or want there, you know. And if you currently identify as asexual for those reasons, that's okay, right? What's not okay is if someone blatantly knows that it's their trauma stopping them having sex, and they come within the asexual community and they just really want to cover up the fact they have not dealt with their trauma, and clearly they still have sexual urges, they clearly would have sex if they could, and they just haven't dealt with the trauma themselves, right? You need to deal with your trauma if that's you, right? Don't come into the asexual community saying I'm asexual because, you know, you've had a bad sexual experience and it's purely that's stopping you having sex, and you still get the right. That's not even being self-aware, and it's not being helpful to yourself. Go and get some help for that, right? Go and get some help. You know, I know some people that are disabled that are genuinely asexual, and there's some people that are disabled and they don't fit into, you know, the normal sexual community because their disability stops them from having sex. And sometimes they come in the asexual community, and some of those are really still really desperate to have sex, or having this sexual energy that's pent up, and they're getting very aggressive, or very, you know, like they don't understand why asexuals wouldn't want to be touched. They're very sexual still minded, you know. And you have to realize that having a disability, you know, again, shouldn't change your sexual orientation, right? You know, like I have fibromyalgia, but I was still asexual before I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, for example. You know, it's not my disability that makes me asexual, for example, right? So you need to analyze that if you've got a disability as well, you know. Like, I understand that it's very difficult if you've got a disability or been in an accident, you can no longer have sex, right? I get that. And maybe being with an asexual in a relationship would be the best thing for you, but trying to pretend you're asexual when you're not, and denying yourself the reality of the fact that you do get sexual urges, you know, and maybe that they're pent up emotions and they don't come out the right way, you know, you need to deal with that, right? You need to understand yourself better, use sex toys or do something else in order to help that frustration, right? But that is not the same as not experiencing sexual attraction, not getting the urge or the need or the want for it, as in the want in the sex itself, you know. Some asexuals will be like, oh, I want sex, but the majority that say stuff like that are the ones that are saying it because of the intimacy rather than the sex itself, and because they want to do that with their partner because their partner likes it. Well, you know, if they had the choice of doing sex or not, the majority of those people wouldn't do sex because they wouldn't really need it, and they certainly wouldn't need it that much, you know. So please, I urge you to look within yourself and reflect really truly if you identify with asexuality or not, you know. Only you can make that decision, right? Life is about becoming self-aware. I've been very self-aware for a number of years, but most people are going around on autopilot. They don't stop and think and analyze themselves, why they behave in certain ways, why they are the way they are, how they feel, how they think, what their reactions are. You know, they don't do that, but it's important that you do that, and that you take time out for you, and that you really, really love yourself for who you are, no matter what it turns out to be, like whether you have had sexual trauma and sexual abuse and that is stopping you having sex and you're not really asexual and you discover that, or whether you discover, damn it, I've had some sexual abuse, but I was asexual anyway, you know, or I'm asexual and that is all you need to know, you know. And so please reflect on yourself, please be honest with yourself, please look within. And if you have had sexual abuse and sexual trauma, you feel in any way, shape or form that is stopping you having sex, please seek professional help and advice. Because if you feel it's stopping you, then it's highly likely that it probably is in some way. If you feel that the bad sexual experiences and trauma you have has got nothing to do with why you don't want sex, and you would have it if you could, then you know what I mean? So if you're an asexual person and you've had sexual abuse, and if you wanted to have sex, then you'd have it, you know? It's different to sexual trauma. Like, if I want to have sex, I'd have it, right? I'm not interested in having sex. I don't want it. But I know if I did, I would have it. So, do you know what I mean? I know what I'm doing in that department. I know how it's done. I try and push myself to think, would I ever want that? But it always comes out the same thing. I'd just be forcing myself to do it, not because I want to do it, just to please someone else. And that's not the reason, right? You shouldn't be having to force yourself to do anything to please someone else, right? That's like someone trying to force themselves to love someone who they don't really love. They're just doing it because they feel they have to, right? And I've left that life behind. You know, I've recently quit actively pursuing dating relationships after almost 7 years because well, probably throughout most of my life I've been you know, like when I've been single, I've been pursuing dating relationships, but I've been single since 2011 actually. So but I've been on asexual dating sites since 2014. I'm still on them. I'm still in asexual dating groups. I'm still running asexual dating groups, but I'm not actively pursuing that anymore because I want to sort my own life and career out at the moment and plan my time, energy and efforts into this channel. You'll notice I'm doing a lot more videos, even though I'm not like live streaming as much as I normally would. That's because I'm still classed as being off sick from my work, and sometimes I am in pain and stuff. Sometimes I do some work at night, and so I kind of have to finish what I'm doing. So, but I'm trying to bring you as much content as possible to help you in your own asexual life journey. I hope you found this video useful, helpful, insightful. If you had any way, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to share this video with anyone you think may benefit from it. I am doing shorts videos as well as these long live streams nowadays, so that people who want really short, snappy videos can actually get instant advice and help really, really quickly about different parts of asexual life. So I hope you're enjoying them. So far, I think you are. I'm still doing some no sex movie reviews because I know you love those. Anyway, if you've got any ideas for future shows you want that you know I could do, please pop them down below in the comments. Usually around the topics of asexuality, dating or relationships. It's really welcome. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video live stream. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that great big bell icon so you get notified of every time I go live. Like now, I'll post a new video. And I'll see you on the next video live stream. Take care and lots of love to you. Bye-bye. Bye.